Alright, what's up guys? Sorry that I'm unable to be at school today, but hopefully this Chalk Talk will walk you through the lesson just fine, and then you will have time to do your homework. My goal with this would be to cover this in about 20-25 minutes. When I ask you to stop and try the problem on your own, please make sure that you do actually stop and try the problem on your own. Yeah, I can't really actually see you, but come on. Be honest. So, your surly friend, we talked about surly, it's that friend that's always kind of grumbly. He decides he can improve his mood if he takes up gardening. He has a 400 square foot garden where 40% of it is fruit. We then get told 1/4 of it is going to be vegetables and 1/10 of it will be herbs and the rest will be flowers. So this rest will be flowers. We don't even know how much is flowers. So we want to talk about these things in one common form. So we've got percent, fraction, and decimal. So let's just go ahead and make ourselves a little table, and we'll kind of try to structure everything we have here. This can work. So we've got 40%, and then 1/4. Actually, I'm going to shift these over and say, this is fruit, will be our 40%, and vegetables will be our 1/4. And herbs will be 1/10, and flowers, say FL for that, will be whatever's left over. So to figure out how much is left over, we really need to get these into a common form. And since we want to calculate how much square footage each of them has, let's go ahead and deal with percents, because I know once I find the percent, I can then calculate the square footage, but to do the math, we have to convert to decimal form. So it would actually be easiest to put all of these in their decimal form. So our fruit here, our fruit here, 40% becomes 0.4, 1/4 becomes 25 hundredths or 0.25, 1/10 is 10 hundredths if you add the extra zero that we don't necessarily need there. And now I can figure out how much I have for flowers because I have 40, then 65, then 75 hundredths already accounted for. So this must be 25 hundredths. See how it was very hard to figure it out if we have these mixed forms, some percent, some fraction, some decimal. Way easier once we have the decimal values. So I want you guys to pause the video and try to calculate the actual square footage of each section, because then we would use that to determine how many seeds we can actually purchase and how much we would expect to yield from each of those sections. So remember, to do this, we want to find the part, how much is fruit, how much is vegetables. So for each of these parts, we're going to use the percent equation, where part equals percent times whole. And hopefully you can see that. If not, I'll drag that there so that the other screen is not blocking that. So for each of these, take your decimal form of your percent and then multiply by the whole value, which is 400 square feet. So when we reason through this, hopefully you're able to calculate this. You can also think of 4/10 or 25 hundredths and break down your 400 into tenths or hundredths. So I know that if I break down my 400 into tenths, 40 will be every tenth. So I have 4 40s, or 4/10 gives me 160 square feet. Then 1/4 of 400 is going to be 100 square feet. Same down here for your 25%, the other quarter. And we have 10% right here, will of course be 40 square feet. So hopefully you had no issues getting to that value. I'm going to pause this, capture the image, and come back for the next problem. All right, so fairly soon, a lot of you are probably going to start trying to get jobs to make your own money. And one thing that a lot of people end up doing is babysitting for neighbors or family or some people that already know them and trust them and know that they're a reliable young adult. So let's say that one of you is babysitting and you're getting paid $8 an hour. But you've been doing such a good job that they say, you know what, you deserve a raise. We're going to give you a 25% raise. So this kind of goes back to our percent change or percent error calculation. This is kind of like an error or change happening to the original 100%, because this $8 an hour is your original 100%. We're going to have a new value that is my new 100%, but that new value is an increase of 25. So I could either use my knowledge of adding to 100% and do 125% of my $8 and find out my new value, or I could just calculate my raise on its own and then add it. So I'm going to show you both ways. The raise will be 25% of the original $8. 25% becomes 0.25 times 8. We also know that 0.25 is the fraction 1/4. So 1/4 of 8 is $2. So your raise would then have to add with the original 8, and that would give us, sorry, I should scoot this. Now that we know the raise is 2, add it with the 8, and we will now be making $10 an hour. So actually we should go ahead and put the unit of per hour, because this is actually our unit rate. So now if I want to do this the other way, where I combine my percentages, I start by saying that the new value will be 125% of the previous. So my new pay will be 125% of my previous, or my original. So then I convert my 125% to a decimal, which becomes 1.25. Of converts to a multiplication. My original hourly rate was 8. I do 1.25, or I could think of this as an improper fraction of 5/4 times 8 over 1. That would give me 40 over 4, which that reduces down to $10 an hour, or per hour. You can really use whichever word you would like. So we here used our percent greater than 100, but hopefully it makes sense how we got there, knowing that we have to raise 25% from an original $8, which was our 100% back then. Now, this will be our new 100%, and you would hope that you would again get another raise, maybe in a month or two if you keep doing a good job. All right, so now I want you guys to try the got it on your own. So pause the video, set this up. We want to use a percent greater than 100. So if you need to at first, figure out how we set that up to get our percent greater than 100, knowing that I'm getting a 20% raise off of my price that I used to get paid of $7.50 an hour, which would be a pretty fantastic price if you were only charging that. Pause the video, set this up on your own, come back for the solution. All right, so hopefully you were able to either do this on your paper or do this mentally to figure out that my new pay will be the original 100% that I was making plus my raise of 20%. So that gives me a value of 120% of my original pay for my new pay. So then we set up that our new pay will be 120% of the original, 120% because percent tells me divide by 100, just to remind you of why we do that. We then get 1.20. Again, that last zero is unimportant. The original value here was 750. It kind of looks like a comma. And when I do this calculation, I get that 120% of the original 750 comes out to be $9 an hour, which we can also write using the slash because that will tell me $9 per hour, since that slash really represents division. So if I worked for 2 hours, we'd make 18, 3 hours would make 27, and so on. Hopefully you were able to solve that on your own. If you weren't, please analyze how we walked through the process and let me know if you have any questions. All right, so now we have a problem about a semi-truck. So semi-trucks, if you've never noticed this, as they drive down the highway, they have to stop and weigh in depending on what sort of truck it is and what cargo it's hauling, because they have to check that it has what it's supposed to have on it, doesn't have anything else that it's not supposed to have on it, and that nobody's stolen anything from it while they're traveling. So we see this problem here. This oil truck weighs 26 3/5 tons at the start of the cross-country trip. Just by the way, a ton is 2,000 pounds, in case you care to know that. We're not going to use that knowledge in this problem, but it's good to know that is 2,000 pounds. So that's our original 100% of the weight of the truck. The driver estimates that he used fuel equivalent to 0.95% of the truck's starting weight during the trip. Did he lose any of the cargo during the trip? Like if the seals leaked and things sloshed out, which would not be good because oil on the highway is a very bad thing. So we can set up our formula that weight loss is going to equal 0.95% of our initial starting weight which is going to be 26, but we don't really want to work in the mixed number form, so it'd be better to convert my 3/5 into a decimal. So to do that, we first convert to a fraction that has either a 10 or a 100 or a 1,000 or a 10,000, some multiple of 10 in the denominator. So can my 5 become a 10? Yes. How do we do it? We multiply by 2. So I do the same thing on top, and I get 6/10, which becomes 6/10 as the decimal. So this is 26 and 6/10 tons, and we'll make sure to put our units on here at the end. So before I can do the math, we have to make sure we convert to our decimal form. Remember that percent tells me to divide by 100. Now this is where people make their mistakes. We already have a decimal form value, and when I divide by 100, it becomes an even smaller decimal form. So be careful. This is going to be a very small number, 0.0095. My 9 looked a little goofy there. So we'll just abbreviate this WL for weight loss, and of becomes our multiplication, 26.6. So I want you to finish up this calculation and make your own determination based off this value right here being the weight that the truck weighed in at. So what I want you to do is figure out what the weight loss was and then calculate what should the truck weigh right now and see if this weight matches that. So pause the video, take a moment to try this on your own. All right, so once we calculate our 95 hundredths of a percent of 26.6 tons, that becomes 0.2527 or 2,527 ten-thousandths. And then we subtract that away from our original weight to find out what the new weight should be. And we found out that the new weight should be 26.3473 tons. Since the final weigh-in was 26.32 tons, when we look at the did he lose any of his cargo on his trip, well, the weight that he should have weighed in at does not match the weight that he did weigh in at. And since that weight is lower, we can say that yes, he did lose some of his cargo, and we can do this subtraction to find out how much he lost. 273 ten-thousandths of a ton. Now, you might say, well, that's like the tiniest number ever. Why does it matter that he lost that much? But when we calculate 273 ten-thousandths of a ton, this actually comes out to be 54, and you can't see this, I realize that now. This comes out to be 54.6 pounds. So this is actually how much cargo he lost. When I compute, and you can't see that because it's below, but hopefully you can see it on this camera. When I compute, I find out that he lost almost 55 pounds of cargo, which is not good because 55 pounds of oil is a big deal. They normally sell oil in 55-gallon drums. A lot of times, well, water weighs 8 pounds per gallon. Oil would weigh more than that. But I mean, that's gallons of oil that were lost somewhere. So that would be quite important when looking at what happened on the truck's trip. Does anything need to be repaired or anything like that? So try this, got it on your own. It says, a school estimates that the expenses of a running fundraiser will be about 3.25% of the total amount. Remember, of tells me to multiply, that they collect. The fundraiser collects in total $16,000. And the amount, after expenses was $14,500. So did their estimate accurately calculate what their expenses were going to be? And if their estimate wasn't accurate, was their estimate higher than it actually ended up being, or was it lower than it actually ended up being? There are a few ways to solve this problem. So when I come back with a solution, it may not exactly match what you have, but there's multiple right ways to get to Florida, multiple ways to solve this problem. So pause the video. Hopefully you pause the video. But when we start talking about this, we have $16,000 in total that we bring in. We end up with $14,500 after expenses. I can do the difference between them and subtract and find out that our expenses ended up being $1,500. So what we want to do is figure out, well, was our estimate accurate? Take your estimate of 3.25% of the total. We need to convert our 3.25 into decimal form. Sorry, so we divide by 100, which moves our decimal 2 places. So we have to add 1 0 out front. I almost added too many. Of becomes multiplication. Our total was 16. Sorry, this is no longer percent. My bad. Hopefully a couple of you recognized that and saw that I was about to make a mistake. So of becomes multiplication. Our total is 16,000. And when we calculate this, which of course you may use a calculator unless you really want to challenge yourself and do this multiplication written out on paper, this comes out to be 520. So when we look at what their expenses actually were compared to what their expenses were estimated to be, their estimate was totally off. So we need somebody better estimating our expenses, or maybe we bought things that were way too pricey, like the food we bought was more expensive than what they had estimated. Whatever reason goes into this, they definitely had an inaccurate estimate for their expense amount. Now, another way that we could have done this was to calculate, actually, if you have questions about this, come talk to me, but I'm trying to keep this video brief, so let's keep moving on. So our example here says a condo association collects monthly fees that total $1,200. The fees paid by the owner of each unit is based on the percent of the building that they own, which is a very fair model. Some places charge everyone the same amount, even if their units are different sizes. So here, their fees paid are based on their sizes. Apartment 1 gets 1/6 of the building, or they round up to 17% because that would be 16.6 repeating forever. Units 3 and 4 get 1/3, or they round up to 34%. So it asks us how much more does the condo association collect than it needs to each month due to the rounding of the percents of ownership. So what is the percent error then they ask us in these fees? So we'll calculate how much extra they collect, and then we will calculate the error. So to figure out how much extra, well, I have apartments 1 and 2, so there are 2 apartments each paying 17%. So that, based off them, is 34%. I have 2 apartments, 3 and 4, paying 34% each, and that comes out to be 68%. So if we actually add these together, we are going to get 102%. So they are actually collecting 2% more than what they need to be. So then to find our error, we can calculate 2% is 0.02 times the monthly fees that they planned to collect. And 2% of 1,200 becomes $24. So every month they are collecting $24 extra than they really actually need to be. So hopefully that $24 is going to something good. And our final got it here. Try this completely on your own. I'm not even going to talk about the setup. So I want you to pause the video and try to do the highlighting, the identification, answer both these questions, then come back. I'm going to have the solution shown, so please pause the video right now. All right, so we've got 3 friends here that each want to pay 30% of the meal. Because a lot of people say, oh, I ate 1/3 of the meal. 1/3 is approximately 30%, which is why we use the wavy, the squiggly equal sign, because it's not actually equals, it's just close to equals. But the problem is 1/3 is not actually 30%. So let's look at what problems this is going to create. If 3 friends each pay 30%, in total they pay 90%. Now that's not okay, because you can't pay 90% of the food that you ate. You've got to pay for 100% of it. But if they tried to pay only 90%, we'd do 90% or 0.90 of $37.50, our total meal amount. They would have tried to pay only $33.75, which when I do the borrowing here, I get $3.75. So that is how much more the friends would actually need to pay based off their rounding. Now, when we want to calculate what was the percent error, remember percent error is just the change or the difference. So this is the difference off of the total bill. To calculate our percent error, we will take 3.75, divide it by 37.50 because that was the original amount. we get 0.10 or an error of 10%, which makes sense because if I go back and I compare 90% of the meal, how much are they forgetting to pay? They're forgetting to pay 10% of the meal, which is why our error comes out to be 10%. Hopefully all of this makes sense to you. If you have any issues on the homework, please comment on Schoology and let me know. I will have access to internet, so I will be checking in there, and we can talk about this stuff in class tomorrow too. So please make sure you have your notes copied down correctly. I am going to check your notes, so hopefully you watch to the end of the video to see that I'm gonna check these notes tomorrow when I come back. So let me know if you have issues. Otherwise, keep working hard. I'll see you guys later.